If your only goal is to hit a 10-inch circle at 100 yards, then you probably don't need to pay a whole lot of attention to your rifle brass. However, as your level of precision increases, so must your attention to detail. One of those details is the length of your case. Welcome to Connect the Dots. In this video, I want to show you why and how to trim your rifle brass. One of the cool things about this video is I'm going to start at the basics and then get as in-depth as I can. For some of the information, you're going to be like, well, I don't need to do this. This is more than what I need to do. And you're probably correct. Not everybody's trying to hit an 1/8 dot at 200 yards. What I would like you to do is take bits and pieces of the information that fits your style so that you can develop your own process. As with most of my videos, there is a written version that can be found on my website, ctdshooting.com. So let's get to it. There are three main reasons why you should trim your brass: ease and safety of chambering, increased precision, and proper neck turning depth. Ease and safety of chambering is pretty easy to understand. When the rifle brass is too long for the chamber, the brass can actually be squished when you chamber the round. This can lead to a whole bunch of bad things happening to the brass, the rifle, and possibly the shooter. In many ways, rifle precision is about consistency and limiting the variables that can affect the bullet's path to the target. Powder charge, seating depth, and neck tension are considered the big three when it comes to the tuning puzzle. But there are other smaller, yet sometimes noticeable pieces of the puzzle. One of those is uniformity of the case necks. When the case necks are all the same length, the bullet will travel the same distance through the neck tension. That helps keep the pressures consistent, which increases precision. Now, it's important to remember that the degree of uniformity is based on what rung your rifle is on the precision ladder. In other words, not all rifles are capable of showing or picking up on the differences in the case necks. For example, my level 4 rifle, this is a competition rifle, it will pick up those differences. Level 3 rifle, probably, and a level 2 rifle, maybe. It all depends on how far off the case necks are. Proper neck thickness is the main goal when turning your necks. However, the depth of the cut on the shoulder is also important. That depth is controlled by the stop on the cutting pilot and also by the lengths of the neck. When the cases are not trimmed to the same length, the depth on the cut on the shoulder will be off the same amount. If you cut too deep on the shoulder, that can lead to split shoulders and also case neck separation. With all that being said, case trimming isn't rocket science. You're going to do a good job as long as a few basic principles are met. One principle that needs to be met is that the mouth of the case needs to be parallel with the base of the case. In other words, the mouth needs to be cut square. If you truly want to shoot small groups, then the bullet has to be released evenly from the case. If that case is not square, one side will have a bigger influence than the other. A super rough way of checking this is to simply set the case on end. What I like to do, more accurate way, is I measure the case and then I simply rotate the case in the calipers and see if my dial moves. If it moves from one side to the other, then we know that we're not square. This one's pretty good. Another basic principle is the trimming length of the brass. If you are neck turning, I like to trim the brass slightly short of the maximum chamber length. I like to go 2/1000 under. Now sometimes the brass is already under that, so in those cases, I just uniform to the shortest length. The reason for that is when you fire from the brass, it usually shortens. So I want to have it long to start with, so that way it can shorten. If I'm not neck turning, then I don't worry about uniform the brass. I just let the brass move the way it wants to during fire forming, and then I'll trim after the third firing. There are different ways of determining the maximum case length. For custom barrels, you can ask the gunsmith who chambered it, or you can look at the reamer print. For factory barrels, the SAMI specs found in many reloading manuals will work. Chamber casts, when done correctly, can also give you lots of important information. Quick reminder to hit the like and subscribe button. That will help Connect the Dots continue to grow and get better. If you're in the market for a thermal, may I suggest Santa Claus Optics in Santa Claus, Indiana. When I was researching thermals, there was so much information that I got lost in the data. Travis Shelton at Santa Claus Optics walked me through every step. Check them out, santaclausoptics.com. When trimming fired brass, both for competition brass and hunting brass, I like to follow the 2-10-20 rule. 2. Trim all the pieces of brass to the same length if any of them vary by 2 thousandths or more. The number 10 actually has two meanings. First, if any of the brass gets within 10 thousandths of the maximum case value, I trim all the pieces. For example, this 30BR, it has a maximum case length of 1.520. So if any of these pieces get within 10 thousandths of that, so 1.510 or longer, then I'll trim all the pieces. The second meaning of number 10 is the shortest that I will trim the brass back is 10 thousandths under the maximum case value. So again, 1.520, the longest that I'm going to trim these to is 1.510. The number 20, that is the maximum I will trim this case to from the maximum case length. For example, 30BR 1.520, the maximum I will trim this case to is 1.500. Now sometimes that 20 thousandths rule is impossible to follow. For example, I have a 6mm Remington Ackley. Its maximum case length is 2.254. This piece of brass and most of those pieces in there are at 2.224. So they're already 30 thousandths under the maximum case length. There's nothing I can do about that. So I simply uniform to the shortest piece. Now, is the 2-10-20 rule set in stone? Absolutely 100% no. I have stolen those numbers from some of the greatest shooters in the world by talking to them after tournaments. I don't think the important part of those are those exact numbers. Instead, I think having a guideline that is easy to follow and works for you, that's the important part. The third basic principle is uniformity. Making sure that all pieces of brass are the same length is the name of the game when trimming your brass. The higher your level of precision desired, the less deviance there can be in each individual case. I've had people ask me if I took a competition rifle, one of the most accurate rifles in the world, and I shoot a group with brass that is trimmed 10 thousandths under the max case value. So for example, a heavy varmint 30BR 1.520, we trim all these pieces of brass to 1.510, and then I go and shoot a group. I then take the same rifle, same load, same cases, but now I trim them to 1.500. Would I be able to tell a difference in the group? And for me, the answer is absolutely not. And honestly, I don't know any shooters that could. However, if you take 5 pieces of brass, and these pieces all vary by 10 thousandths, so 1.500, 1.502, all the way up to 1.510, and you shoot a group with those 5 pieces, a lot of people would see their groups open up. That is why uniformity is more important than the actual number that you trim to. I'm guessing many of you already know about this, but in case you haven't heard, there's a publication out there called Handloader Magazine. Tons of great technical information and stories covering all types of reloading. This magazine is published bi-monthly, so you'll get 6 issues a year. They also have a YouTube channel called Handloader TV. There's a link in my description to check them out. Okay, let's try some. This is my heavy varmint 30BR. The maximum case length is 1.520, and this one's 1.501. So I'm under the 10 thousandths. 1.501. 1.501. And I'm just randomly going through these. 1.501. I kind of cheated. This is the brass that I took to the Nationals, and I only have 2 or 3 firings on it, so I knew that that brass was going to be good. But that shows that I don't need to trim that brass. This brass, this is my 2250, and to be honest, I don't know the last time I trimmed it. I don't remember. The maximum case length is 1.912, and this one is 1.893. 1.899. So right there, that's 6 thousandths. I don't need to measure all. I'm going to trim all of them. And the maximum case length, like I said, is 1.912. So I'm going to set up my trimmer to trim anywhere between 1.902 and 1.892. Most likely, I'm going to try and get closer to the 1.892. Okay, so I got my trimmer set up. I use a Wilson trimmer, and I set it up to, I wanted to get 1.892, and these are at 1.893. So that's close enough. And one thing I forgot to mention, when you're measuring them, and especially when you're trimming them, is make sure you take the primer out. The primer is supposed to be sunk in there, but we all know that sometimes the primer is sticking out. And if you go to measure that and the primer is sticking out, then you're going to get an incorrect measurement of what the actual case length is. So take the primer out, and then what I like to do is I just trim these, and I set some of them off to the side. And I can tell, like that one, that didn't make a sound, and it was super light. So this one's probably under the 1.9, yeah, 1.891. For hunting brass, I'm not going to mess with that. This one you can hear, and I can feel it, and you might be able to see it. There's a lot more resistance. It kind of reminds me of using a skill saw and a 2x4. You can tell when you're through the wood, you can feel the resistance of the wood, you can hear it, and you can feel when that resistance is gone. The same thing is true in these case trimmers. So 1.893. So those cases are all good. I don't measure every single case. I usually do 4 or 5. Set them off to the side. And you can see it goes pretty fast once you get everything set up. Do another one. And I'll measure this one. 1.893. That means all these are good. If I was a long range shooter, like 600 to 1,000 to 2,000 yards, I'd probably be measuring every single case. For the hunting I do, the 100, 200, and 300 yards, this is good. I have all my pieces of brass trimmed, and while I was doing these 25 pieces, a situation came up that I want to kind of share with you of what happened. I was trimming the pieces, and as usual, I put out 4 or 5, whatever it is, and then I measure that 5th one or 6th one, and if they do not come out to be the measurement that I want, then I go back through and I remeasure all those in that pile to see if any of the other ones are off. And that actually happened when I was doing a set of these 22 to 50 brass. So I just want to let you guys know about that. Once you get the brass trimmed, you have to put an angle to the inside of the case neck. You need to chamfer it. And I like to use the Wilson 45-degree deburring tool. And to do that, I'll just set this up. I'll show you how I set it up. I set it up so that it's not hitting. I know it's tough to see with this stop there in the way. But I'll go until I can feel just a little bit of resistance. I want just a little bit more than that. And then I measure that. And I can look. There's not enough of the angle there, I can already tell. And my measurement is still 1.893. So I want to go just a little bit deeper. That looks much better. And my measurement is still 1.893. So I don't know if you can see that in the video or not, but that's the angle that I'm looking for. If I keep going farther, I can actually make that case grow in length. I can get it to 1.894, 1.894 and a half. That's when I know I've gone too far on setting up this deburring tool. If you go way too far, then you'll actually make the case shrink. So your case will be the right length. Set up your deburring tool, your chamfering tool, and it should not change the length of your brass. If you're just slightly too much, it's going to actually make your case grow. And if you go way too far, then your case is shrinking. So freshen up your drink. I'm going to chamfer the rest of these tools, these cases, and I'll be right back. Deburring is the last step in your case trimming process. Deburring the outside of the case next. This removes any burrs left from trimming and from chamfering. I like to use the deburring tool on the RCBS Case Prep Center, and I can feel it, and I can also hear it when I get all those burrs off. But just to make sure, I have a Wilson hand trimmer or hand deburring tool, and that allows me to make sure that there's no burrs left over. I can feel that. Smooth. I can feel that when it's hitting that burr. Now that burr's gone, and then I just check to make sure with the hand tool. So I'm going to do that for all the pieces. Be right back. Once your brass has been fired 2 or 3 times, improper die setup is going to be one of your main reasons for case growth. Specifically, if you're bumping the shoulders back too far, you can cause your cases to grow. On hunting brass, I like to bump my shoulders back 1 to 2 thousandths. On competition brass, it's a 1/2 to 1 thousandths. If you're interested, I do have a blog and a video on how to set up your resizing die. How much time you put into trimming your rifle brass should match up to your desired precision. In other words, the tighter you want your groups, the more attention you have to pay to the details. Until next time, enjoy the experience.